My wedding aisle was silent, flanked by empty chairs where my parents should have been. A text arrived, claiming they would celebrate later because my brother's Hawaii trip was already booked. But the horror was not their absence. It was what they were signing in Hawaii while I said my vows. Months later, they called to invite me to another wedding to play Happy Family. I looked at the fraudulent number on my credit report and smiled. Not this time. My name is Violet Jenkins. I was 34 years old, standing in the vestibule of a converted barn in Hendersonville, North Carolina, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, and shivering despite the humid warmth of a late May afternoon. The air smelled of sweet hay and expensive perfume, a cloying mixture that made my stomach turn. Through the sliver of space between the heavy oak doors, I could see the ceremony space. The guests were seated. The string quartet was playing a soft, acoustic version of a song Caleb and I had chosen together. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as I had planned it for 18 months. Except for the front row on the left side of the aisle, there were 4 chairs there. White, wooden folding chairs with padded seats. Draped over the back of each one was a garland of eucalyptus and white roses. Pinned to the fabric were elegant, calligraphy-printed signs on heavy cardstock. Mother of the bride, father of the bride, brother of the bride. They were empty. They were not just empty, they were loudly, violently vacant, in a sea of pastel dresses and navy suits. That gap in the front row looked like missing teeth in a smile. It looked like a wound. I looked down at the phone clutched in my hand, my knuckles white against the screen. The notification was still there, glowing with a brightness that stung my eyes. It was a text message from my mother, Diane Whitaker. It had arrived 12 minutes ago. We will celebrate later. Honey, Logan's Hawaii trip is already booked. There was no apology. There was no explanation of a sudden illness or a missed flight or a flat tire on the interstate. There was no, I am so heartbroken, or I cannot believe this is happening. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the casual indifference of someone canceling a lunch date because they found a better offer. Logan's Hawaii trip. My brother, Logan, was 31 years old. He worked in sales and treated the world as if it were a customer service department designed to cater to his whims. My mother treated him like the regional manager. If Logan wanted Hawaii, Logan got Hawaii. The fact that the dates overlapped with my wedding was treated not as a conflict, but as a minor scheduling error on my part. I could hear the coordinator, a frantic woman named Sarah with a headset, whispering behind me. She was asking if we should remove the signs. She was asking if we should seat other people there to fill the gap. No, I said. My voice sounded strange, thin and brittle like dry leaves. Leave them. I wanted the gap to be seen. I wanted the emptiness to be undeniable. If I removed the signs, I would be covering for them again. I would be smoothing over the cracks in the Whitaker family foundation, just as I had done since I was 6 years old. I would be pretending that my father, Ron, wasn't a man who allowed his wife to dictate his reality. I would be pretending that my mother cared about this day as much as she cared about Logan's tan. I signaled to Sarah. I was ready. The music swelled. The doors groaned open. The sudden influx of natural light was blinding. I took a step forward, and the silence that fell over the crowd was not the reverent silence of a wedding. It was the confused, heavy silence of people realizing something was wrong. I walked alone. I had told Caleb I could do it. I had told him that if they did not show, I would walk myself down that aisle with my head held high. But theory is different from practice. In practice, walking past 120 faces, all turned toward you, all scanning the space beside you for the father who is not there, is a physical ordeal. I could hear the rustle of fabric as people turned. I could feel the pity radiating from the pews like heat. I fixed my eyes on Caleb. He was standing at the altar, looking handsome and solid in his charcoal suit. His jaw was set tight. He saw the empty chairs. He saw the text I had surely received. He looked like he wanted to jump the rail and come get me. But he held his ground, his eyes locking onto mine, offering the only safety in the room. I reached the front. The walk felt like it had taken an hour. I stood there, my breath catching in my throat, the lace of my bodice feeling like a cage. The officiant, a kind, elderly man who had no idea of the war happening in my chest, smiled and looked out at the congregation. He cleared his throat. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? The script. We had forgotten to change the script. The question hung in the air, suspended there, waiting for an answer that was currently 3,000 miles away, probably browsing duty-free shops at an airport. The silence that followed was agonizing. It lasted perhaps 5 seconds, but in my mind, it stretched into an eternity. I could hear a bird chirping in the vineyard. I could hear the embarrassing squeak of someone shifting in their chair. I could feel the blood rising up my neck, a hot flush of absolute humiliation. I was a 34-year-old woman, standing at the altar, unwanted. Then, there was movement from the front row on the right. Caleb's father, Arthur, stood up. He did not hesitate. He did not look around for permission. He simply stepped out of the line of groomsmen where he had been standing as best man, walked over to my side, and took my hand. His grip was warm and rough and terrified me because it was so kind. He looked at the officiant and spoke with a voice that carried to the back row without a microphone. "We do," he said. "We all do." A collective exhale went through the guests. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast, ruining the makeup I had paid $400 for. I squeezed Arthur's hand, and he squeezed back, a silent promise that I was not alone, even if my DNA said otherwise. The rest of the ceremony was a blur. I said the words, I exchanged the rings, I kissed Caleb, but a part of me had detached. A part of me was floating above the scene, looking down at the empty chairs, analyzing the text message again. Hawaii is already booked. The reception was held in a large, open-air pavilion on the property. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the tables, the alcohol began to flow, and the tension eased slightly. I moved from table to table, the dutiful bride, smiling until my face ached. "Where are your parents?" "Violet. Is Ron sick?" We were so looking forward to seeing Diane. The questions were relentless. Each one was a tiny paper cut. I lied. I lied with the proficiency of a woman raised in a house where truth was flexible and image was everything. They had a medical emergency. I said to my college roommate, "Something came up with the house. Flooding." I told Caleb's boss. Unavoidable conflict. I told my neighbor. I was protecting them. Even now, after they had left me standing alone at the altar, I was protecting their reputation. I was shielding them from the judgment of strangers, because the alternative admitting that my mother preferred a tropical vacation with her golden son over her daughter's wedding was too pathetic to say out loud. I was sitting at the head table, picking at a piece of salmon I had no appetite for. When the wedding planner approached me again, she looked apologetic. "Violet, I am so sorry to bother you," she whispered. "But a courier just dropped this off. They said it was for the bride. Priority delivery. It requires a signature, but the driver left it with security." She handed me a thick cream-colored envelope. It was heavy. My heart did a strange double beat. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the grand gesture. Maybe they had sent a check for $50,000. Maybe they had sent a letter explaining that they had been kidnapped. Hope is a stupid, resilient thing. I slid a butter knife under the flap and tore it open. Inside, there was a card. It was a generic wedding card, the kind you buy at a pharmacy for $5. Inside, in my mother's looping, dramatic handwriting, it said, "Thinking of you today. Have a drink for us." That was it. No check, no cash, no heartfelt letter. But behind the card, there was something else folded into the envelope. It looked like a mistake. I pulled it out. It was a single sheet of paper, tri-folded. It looked like a statement or a confirmation page printed from a web browser. I unfolded it under the soft glow of the fairy lights strung above the table. It was a reservation confirmation, the Mahina Coast Vacation Club. I stared at it. The dates matched this weekend. The location was Maui, but it was not just a hotel reservation. It was a closing statement for a timeshare ownership package, a platinum tier membership. My eyes scanned the numbers. The down payment listed was $25,000. The financing terms were listed below that. I frowned. Why would my mother send me this? Was she bragging? Was this her way of showing me what was so important that she had to miss my wedding? Look, honey, we bought a slice of paradise. Aren't you happy for us? But then my eyes caught the bottom of the page, near the signature line. The names listed as the buyers were Diane Whitaker and Logan Whitaker, and below that, in the section marked Guarantor, co-signer. There was another name. It was my name. Violet Jenkins. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. I looked again. My name was typed there. And next to it, there was a digital signature stamp. A stamp that looked vaguely like my signature, but cleaner, lacking the sharp loop I always put on my J. My blood ran cold. The noise of the reception, the DJ playing Motown, the clinking of silverware, the laughter of Caleb's cousins faded into a dull roar, like I was underwater. I looked at the date on the document. It was dated 3 days ago. They were in Hawaii. They were buying a timeshare. And somehow, my name was on the paperwork as a guarantor. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the table. A guarantor. That meant if they did not pay, I paid. That meant my credit history. The pristine score I had built over 15 years of paying my bills on time was now tied to this purchase. Why was this in the envelope? I turned the paper over. On the back, there was a sticky note in Logan's handwriting. Mom grabbed the wrong paper from the printer mix-up, LOL. This was just for the file. Don't worry about it. We handled it. Enjoy the party. I stared at the note. Don't worry about it. The sheer audacity took my breath away. They had used my name. They had forged a digital signature. And then, in a rush to send a card to look like they cared, they had accidentally stuffed the evidence into the envelope along with the pharmacy greeting card. Or maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe Logan was so arrogant, so untouchable, that he didn't even check what he was stuffing into the mailer before he handed it to a courier service. I looked up. Across the dance floor, my friends were forming a circle. They were calling for the bride. They wanted me to dance. I looked at Caleb. He was talking to his mother, a woman who had hugged me earlier and told me I looked like a queen. He was laughing at something she said. He looked safe. He looked honest. Then I closed my eyes and pictured my mother. I pictured Diane Whitaker sitting on a lanai in Maui right now. She would be wearing a caftan. She would have a glass of white wine. She would be telling Logan how smart they were to secure this asset. She would be saying, Violet is fine. Violet is always fine. She understands. She was drinking a cocktail paid for, in part, by the creditworthiness I had worked my entire adult life to secure. They did not just skip my wedding. They skipped my wedding to commit fraud against me. A coldness settled over me. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It wasn't sadness anymore. Sadness is hot. Sadness is messy. This was ice. This was clarity. For 34 years, I had tried to be the daughter they wanted. I had made myself small so Logan could be big. I had apologized for things I didn't do so Ron could have a quiet evening. I had accepted the crumbs of affection Diane tossed my way and called it a feast. I looked at the empty chairs again. The signs were still there. Mother of the bride. She wasn't a mother. She was a parasite. Caleb turned and caught my eye. He saw the envelope in my hand. His smile faded, replaced by concern. He started to walk toward me. I folded the paper. I folded it neatly. Along the original creases, I slid it back into the envelope. Then I folded the envelope in half and shoved it deep into the hidden pocket of my wedding dress. It felt heavy against my hip. It felt like a weapon. Caleb reached me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. "Everything okay?" "Who was that from?" I looked up at him. I smiled. It was a different smile than the one I had worn all day. It didn't reach my eyes, but it was steady. Just some junk mail. I said, "Nothing we need to worry about tonight." I stood up. I took his hand. "Let's dance," I said. As we walked toward the dance floor, I could feel the paper pressing against my thigh. They thought this was over. They thought they had gotten away with the ultimate slight. the ultimate selfishness, and that I would just swallow it like I always did. They thought the worst thing they did to me today was leaving an empty chair. They were wrong. The empty chair was a gift. It was the final proof I needed that I owed them nothing. I wasn't just a bride anymore. I was a witness, and the evidence was in my pocket. I stepped onto the dance floor, the music loud and thumping in my chest. I spun around, my dress flaring out, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel like crying. I felt like a ticking clock. Celebrate later. Mom had said, oh yes, we would celebrate later, but not the way she thought. I held Caleb tight, burying my face in his shoulder, and as the camera flashed, capturing the image of the happy couple, I made a silent vow that was just as binding as the ones I had spoken at the altar. Not this time. I squeezed Caleb's hand, feeling the solid reality of him, and let the rhythm of the music wash over me. The envelope in my pocket was a time bomb, silent and deadly. It hadn't gone off yet, but I knew exactly when I was going to detonate it. To understand the sheer violence of the silence in that wedding chapel, you have to understand the noise that preceded it. You have to understand the life I built in Raleigh, a 2-hour drive from the blast radius of my parents' home, and the quiet, deliberate peace I had cultivated like a rare orchid in a climate not meant for it. I lived in a renovated townhouse on the edge of the city, a space filled with succulents that I managed to keep alive, and books I actually read. I worked as a brand operations manager for North Harbor Creative Systems, a firm headquartered in Minneapolis. My job was entirely remote, which suited me perfectly. My days were spent untangling logistical knots for creative teams, smoothing over communication breakdowns, and ensuring that deadlines were met without bloodshed. I was good at it. I was excellent at de-escalating panic. I could take a hysterical email from a client and turn it into a structured action plan within 10 minutes. It took me a long time to realize that I was so good at my job because I had been training for it since I was a toddler. I met Caleb 3 years ago on a Tuesday that was trying its hardest to drown the state of North Carolina. I had ducked into a small, independent coffee shop near the warehouse district, shaking an umbrella that had inverted itself 3 times on the walk over. The place was packed with people seeking refuge from the downpour. There was one open seat left at a communal wooden table near the window. "Is this taken?" I asked the man sitting there. He looked up from a sketchbook. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a flannel shirt that looked soft enough to sleep in. "It is all yours," he said. We sat in silence for 40 minutes. That was the thing that hooked me. In my family, silence was a vacuum that had to be filled with performance, with praise for Logan, or with nervous chatter to gauge my mother's mood. With Caleb, the silence was just air. It was comfortable. When I finally got up to leave, I knocked my knee against the table leg and spilled the remaining inch of his cold brew onto the floor. "I am so sorry," I gasped, grabbing napkins before the liquid even settled. "I am so sorry. I will buy you another one. I am so clumsy. I am so sorry." He reached out and gently caught my wrist, stopping my frantic wiping. "Violet," he said, reading my name off the cup I was holding. "It is just coffee," and I was finished. You do not need to apologize for gravity. We started dating a week later. Our relationship was the antithesis of the adrenaline-fueled drama I was used to. Caleb was a structural engineer. He looked at the world in terms of loads and supports, stress points and foundations. He was steady. He did not need to be the center of attention. He did not need me to be an audience. For the first time in my life, I was not exhausted. But you cannot outrun your conditioning forever. Even as I built this safe harbor with Caleb, I remained tethered to the Whitaker family dynamic. I was the peacekeeper, the shock absorber, the low-maintenance model. Then there was Logan. My brother was 31 years old, 3 years my junior, and he moved through the world with the unearned confidence of a man who has never been told no. He worked in high-end pharmaceutical sales, a job that required him to be charming, aggressive, and slippery with the truth. To hear my mother, Diane, tell it, Logan was not just selling drugs, he was single-handedly saving Western medicine while looking like a movie star. Logan did not have conversations. He held court. If we went to dinner, we ate where Logan wanted. If we watched a movie, it was Logan's pick. If Logan was in a bad mood, the entire atmospheric pressure of the house dropped until he was soothed. My father, Ron, was the classic enabler. He was a retired accountant, a man who had made a career out of balancing books, but could never balance the emotional ledger of his own home. He was kind in a useless sort of way. He would sneak me a candy bar after Mom yelled at me for gaining weight, but he would never tell her to stop yelling. He would apologize to waitstaff after Logan sent a dish back for the third time, but he would never tell Logan to eat the damn steak. He surrendered his spine to keep the peace, not realizing that peace purchased at the cost of his daughter's dignity was not peace at all. It was just a ceasefire. I remember the pattern vividly. It was a rhythm I had danced to for decades. There was my 25th birthday. I had planned a small dinner at a nice Italian restaurant in town. I had made the reservation 2 weeks in advance. I had sent the calendar invite. I had bought a new dress. At 4 p.m. on the day of the dinner, Diane called. "Honey," she said, her voice breathless, the way it always was when she was pivoting. "We need to reschedule." Why, I asked, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my shoes. "Logan just went through a terrible breakup," she said. "That girl, the blonde one. She ended it. He is devastated. Violet, absolutely crushed. We cannot go out and celebrate while your brother is hurting. It would be cruel. He dated her for 3 weeks. "Mom," I said, a rare flash of defiance rising in my throat. Diane let out a sharp sigh. It was a weaponized sound. "I did not raise you to be callous. Violet, we are ordering pizza and staying in with him. You can come over if you want to support him. Otherwise, we will do your dinner next week." I ended up eating a frozen meal alone in my apartment because I refused to go watch Logan play video games while my parents cooed over his wounded ego. They never rescheduled the dinner. They forgot about it by the time the next week rolled around, and I was too proud, or perhaps too trained, to remind them. Then there was my college graduation. It was a sweltering day in May. I was graduating with honors, a feat I had accomplished while working 2 part-time jobs to pay for the textbooks my parents said they could not afford because Logan needed a new car for his internship. I sat in the stadium, sweating in my polyester gown. Scanning the bleachers, I found them. Mom was fanning herself with a program, looking annoyed. Dad was looking at his watch. Logan was on his phone. When my name was called Violet Marie Jenkins, magna cum laude. I walked across that stage with my heart hammering against my ribs. I accepted the diploma. I shook the dean's hand. I looked up at the spot where they had been sitting, ready to wave, ready to see them finally looking at me with the pride I was desperate to earn. The seats were empty. I found them later in the parking lot, standing by the car with the engine running. "Oh, there you are," Diane said, rolling down the window. "We had to beat the traffic. Honey, Logan has tickets to a concert tonight, and we could not risk getting stuck in the garage. We saw you walk, though. Good job, good job." Like I had tied my shoes correctly. I swallowed the lump in my throat, got in the back seat, and listened to Logan talk about the band he was going to see for the entire 2-hour drive home. I did not cry. Crying would have been dramatic. Crying would have made me the problem. Caleb was the first person to point out the wiring under the floorboards. About 6 months into our relationship, we were making dinner at his place. I was chopping vegetables, and I accidentally dropped a piece of bell pepper on the floor. "Sorry," I yelped, immediately bending down to retrieve it. "God, sorry. I am such a mess." Caleb stopped stirring the sauce. He put the spoon down and turned to me. "Violet," he said, his voice level. I froze, the pepper in my hand. "What?" "You have apologized 9 times in the last hour," he said. I blinked. "No, I haven't. Yes, you apologized for the rain. You apologized for the traffic. You apologized for the grocery store being out of basil. You apologized for your phone ringing. And now you are apologizing to the floor." I stood up, tossing the pepper in the trash. "I'm just being polite." "No," he said, walking over to me. He took my hands in his. "You are preemptively striking. You are apologizing before anyone can be mad at you. It is a defense mechanism. Who made you feel like your existence was an inconvenience? I opened my mouth to defend them, to say that we were just a polite family, but the words died on my tongue. I looked at this man who saw me, really saw me, and I realized how exhausting it was to be constantly bracing for impact. "It is okay," he whispered, pulling me into a hug. "You do not have to do that here. You take up space, Violet, and I like the space you take up." That was the moment I fell in love with him. Not the coffee shop, not the dates, but that moment in his kitchen where he gave me permission to exist without an apology. So when he proposed, a year later, on a quiet hike in the Blue Ridge Mountains, with no audience and no fanfare, just the wind in the trees and a simple gold band, I said yes with my whole heart, but almost immediately, the old programming kicked in. As he slid the ring onto my finger, the sun catching the metal, my mind flashed to my mother. She would have to come to this. A wedding was not a dinner reservation. It was not a graduation ceremony. A wedding was a public declaration of family status. Diane loved a show. She loved to play the role of the doting mother. She would want the photos. She would want to weep delicately into a lace handkerchief while her friends watched. For once, her narcissism would align with my needs. She would show up because it would look bad if she didn't. I looked at Caleb, his face beaming with happiness, and I allowed myself a dangerous luxury. I allowed myself to hope. "We are going to do this right," I told him, my voice trembling slightly. "We will." He promised. I looked out over the valley, the mist clinging to the peaks, and I convinced myself that the ring on my finger was a talisman. It was proof that I was worthy of celebration. Surely, even they could see that. Surely, Logan could step out of the spotlight for one day. Surely, my father would want to walk me down the aisle more than he wanted to avoid an argument. This time, I thought, feeling the weight of the gold on my finger, this time, Mom will come. This time, I will be the priority. It was the most beautiful, heartbreaking lie I ever told myself. I held Caleb's hand and walked back down the mountain, completely unaware that I was walking toward a cliff edge, and that the people I wanted to impress were already packing their bags for a destination that did not include me. We chose May 24th because it was the 3-year anniversary of the day Caleb found me apologizing to a coffee table. It felt poetic. It felt like we were reclaiming a piece of history and building a monument on top of it. We found the venue on a crisp Saturday in October. It was a small, family-owned vineyard in Hendersonville, about 40 minutes from Asheville. It was not grand. It did not have chandeliers dripping with crystal or a ballroom that could fit 1,000 people. It had rolling hills of vines, a refurbished barn with high, vaulted ceilings, and a view of the Blue Ridge Mountains that made you feel small in the best possible way. Standing there with Caleb, his arm around my waist, I watched the wind ripple through the turning leaves and I knew, "This is it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We signed the contract that afternoon. We put down a deposit of $3,500. It was a significant chunk of our savings. But we did it with smiling faces. We locked in the date, May 24th. I called my mother immediately. I was prepared for indifference. I was prepared for critique. I was not prepared for enthusiasm. "Oh!" Violet Diane screamed through the FaceTime connection, her face taking up the entire screen. "A vineyard. That sounds absolutely elegant. Very Napa Valley chic." She wiped a tear from her cheek. I watched, mesmerized. "Was this real? I have to tell the aunts," she continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "My baby is getting married. We have so much to do. What are the colors? Please tell me you are not doing yellow. Yellow washes you out." "Sage green and blush," I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that I had not felt in years. "Perfect," she declared. "I am going to look for a dress. I promise you. Violet, we are going to make this the most beautiful day. I will not miss a single detail." For 3 weeks, I lived in a twilight zone where I had a normal, supportive mother. She sent me links to flower arrangements. She asked to see photos of the venue. She even texted Caleb to welcome him to the family. I started to relax. I let my guard down. I thought that maybe Just maybe. The magnitude of a wedding was enough to shift the gravitational pull of our family away from Logan and onto me, just for a moment. Then came the Tuesday phone call. It was late, around 9 in the evening. I was on the couch with my laptop, finalizing the guest list spreadsheet. When Mom's name popped up, I answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mom, I found a caterer who does those mini crab cakes you like." There was a pause on the other end, a heavy, pregnant pause that made the hair on the back of my arms stand up. "Violet, honey," she started. Her voice was different. The enthusiasm was gone, replaced by a tone I knew intimately. It was her reasonable voice, the voice she used when she was about to ask for something unreasonable. "We have a bit of a hiccup with the date," she said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Well, I was looking at the calendar today, and I realized May 24th is right in the middle of Logan's trip." I frowned. "Logan's trip?" "Yes. Hawaii," she said. As if I should have known this. "You know he has been planning to go to the islands. It is his annual reset. He has had such a brutal quarter with sales. Violet, the stress is eating him alive. He needs this for his mental health." I stared at the wall. Logan did not have an annual Hawaii trip. He had gone once, 4 years ago, with a fraternity brother. "Okay," I said slowly. "But he hasn't booked it yet. Right, I told you the date a month ago." "Well, that is the thing." Diane sighed. "The prices for that week were just too good to pass up. He booked the flights yesterday, and he booked a villa for us, too. He wants the whole family to be there to support him. It is going to be a healing retreat." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You are going. We have to. Honey, he cannot be alone right now. He is fragile." She paused, waiting for me to offer the solution. When I didn't, she pushed. "So, here is what we are thinking. If you push the wedding back to June, or maybe even July, it would actually be better. The weather will be warmer, and that way, we do not lose the money on the plane tickets. They are non-refundable." "Violet," I gripped the phone so hard my hand cramped. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "I cannot move the wedding. We signed a contract. We paid a deposit. The vendors are booked. People have already requested time off work." Diane let out a sharp breath, the sound of patience wearing thin. "It is just a deposit. Violet, what is it? A few $100s. It is $3,500, I snapped. "And it is not just the money. It is the principle. I set this date. I told you. You knew, Violet. Do not raise your voice at me. I am trying to find a solution here. You are being very rigid. A wedding is just a party. Your brother's mental health is a priority. Do you want him to have a breakdown because he could not get his rest?" The gaslighting was so seamless, so practiced. Suddenly, my wedding was an attack on Logan's sanity. "I am not moving the date." "Mom," I said. I was shaking, but the words were clear. "The wedding is May 24th. If Logan chooses to go to Hawaii instead of his sister's wedding, that is his choice. But I'm not losing $4,000 and my self-respect to accommodate a vacation he booked yesterday." There was a silence on the line, a cold, stony silence. "I see," Diane said. Her voice was ice. "I did not realize you had become so selfish." "We will talk later." She hung up. I sat there, the silence of the room crushing me. Caleb walked in from the kitchen, took one look at my face, and pulled the laptop away. "What happened?" he asked. I told him. I watched his jaw tighten. I watched the engineer in him try to find the logic and fail. "They are testing you," he said quietly. "They want to see if you will fold." I didn't fold, but the barrage had just begun. 2 hours later, my phone pinged. It was Logan. "Heard you're freaking out about the dates. Look, flights are non-refundable. You get it. You have always been the understanding one. Just switch it to June. Better for everyone." I read the text 3 times. "You have always been the understanding one." It wasn't a compliment. It was a job description. It was an assignment I had been given at birth. Violet understands. Violet adapts. Violet does not make waves. I typed back, "I'm not changing it." "Logan?" He didn't reply. The next day, the guilt trip escalated. Diane sent me a long text message detailing how hard Logan worked, how he was the top performer in his region, but the pressure was inhumane, and how I, with my easy work-from-home job, couldn't possibly understand the need for deep decompression. A wedding lasts 6 hours. She wrote, "Family is forever. Why are you choosing to make this difficult?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I being selfish? Was $3,500 worth causing a rift? Then came the message from my father. I had been waiting for Ron to step in. I had been hoping, with the desperate optimism of a child, that he would say, "Diane, stop it. This is Violet's day." His text arrived at lunch on Thursday. "Hey kiddo, Mom is pretty upset. Wish the timing was better on all this. Maybe we can look at some dates in the fall. I just want everyone to be happy. Please try to understand the position we are in." The position we are in? He had aligned himself. He was not my father. He was her hostage, and he was negotiating for his own survival, not mine. I realized then that I was alone. I showed the messages to Caleb. He read them, his face darkening. "You do not answer them," he said firmly. "You told them the date. If they miss it, they miss it. Do not negotiate with terrorists." So I stopped. I stopped explaining. I stopped apologizing. I continued planning. I booked the florist. I scheduled the dress fitting. I moved forward with the momentum of a freight train, ignoring the burning bridge behind me. A week passed in silence. Then, a notification popped up from Diane. The tone had shifted again. It was breezy, casual, as if the war of the last 7 days had never happened. "Okay, honey. We talked it over. We are going to try to make it work. We might have to fly in late, but we want to be there." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it almost knocked me down. They were coming. They were crazy, and they were manipulative, but they were coming. "I am booking the domestic connection flights for Dad and me from Ohio down to North Carolina," she wrote. "I want to get everything organized in one system so I do not lose track of the itineraries. Send me your full info, current address, full legal name as it appears on your ID, and your birth date. I want to put you down as the destination contact so the airline sends the updates to you, in case we are in the air." It seemed like a peace offering. It seemed like she was finally taking charge of the logistics to be helpful. She was booking the flights. She was making it work. I did not pause. I did not hesitate. I was so desperate to secure their attendance, so desperate to lock in this fragile victory, that I typed it all out. Violet Marie Jenkins. Date of birth: October 14th, 1989. Current address: 402 Maplewood Drive, Raleigh. NC, thanks. Mom, I wrote, "I really appreciate it. Got it." She replied instantly. "Love you." I stared at the screen, feeling a warm glow of resolution. I turned to Caleb. "They are coming," I said, smiling. "She is booking the flights right now." I had no idea that I had just handed them the keys to the kingdom. I thought I was sending details for a flight itinerary. I didn't know I was filling out the guarantor section of a contract that would haunt me for years. I didn't know that while I was planning a wedding, they were planning a purchase, and that my good credit was the only guest of honor they actually cared about. I put my phone down and went back to my spreadsheet, humming a soft tune, completely unaware that the trap had just snapped shut. The digital siege began on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the wedding. I had convinced myself that providing my personal information for the flight bookings was the end of the conflict. I thought I had purchased their attendance with my compliance. I was naive. In the modern era, family warfare does not happen on a battlefield. It happens in the notification center of an iPhone. It started with the Whitaker Fam group chat. For years, this thread had been mostly dormant, used only for wishing happy birthday or sharing photos of the dog. Suddenly, it became a stage. Diane sent a link to an article titled "The Art of Letting Go: Why Adult Children Drift Away." She added no caption. She just let the preview image, a weeping mother's silhouette against a sunset, sit there in the chat, radiating passive-aggressive heat. 2 hours later, she posted a status update on Facebook. I did not follow her closely, but my notifications lit up as 3 of my bridesmaids sent me screenshots with question marks. The post read, "A mother's heart is a heavy burden. We sacrifice our bodies, our finances, and our youth, only to find that in our golden years, we are viewed as obligations rather than treasures. Learning to prioritize my own peace today. Healing family first." I stared at the screen, my coffee turning cold in my hand. Family first. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. She was using the hashtag of the very concept she was actively destroying. Then Logan joined the fray. Logan did not use Facebook. That was for old people. Logan used Instagram stories. He posted a photo of his new luggage, a sleek, aluminum carry-on that probably cost more than my wedding cake. Tucked into the front pocket was a printed itinerary. The caption was overlaid in a bold, sans serif font, counting down the days. Sometimes you have to step away from the little events to focus on the big picture. Mental wealth over everything. Hawaii-bound sales life. Little events. He was calling my wedding a little event. He was publicly minimizing the most important day of my life to his 2,000 followers, framing his vacation as a heroic act of self-preservation. I sat at my desk, trembling. I wanted to reply. I wanted to scream into the chat. I wanted to comment on his story and say, "You are not going for mental health. You are going because you are a spoiled brat who cannot handle not being the center of attention." But I didn't. I held my tongue. I had spent 34 years holding my tongue, and the muscle memory was too strong to break. My phone buzzed again. It was Sarah, my maid of honor. "Hey Vi," the text read, "is everything okay? Your mom's post is intense. Are they still coming?" I typed out a lie. "Oh, you know Diane. She is just dramatic about the travel logistics. They are excited." I hit send and felt a wave of nausea. I was covering for them again. I was the PR manager for a company that was actively trying to fire me. The torture continued for days. It was a slow-drip method of psychological warfare. Diane would send a message in the group chat asking Logan if he had packed his sunscreen, completely ignoring the photo I had sent 5 minutes earlier of the wedding seating chart. Ron would react to Logan's messages with a thumbs-up emoji and leave mine on read. It was a clear message. We are a unit. You are an outsider. Then came the ultimatum. It was 10 days before the wedding. I was finalizing the head count for the caterer. I needed a hard number. I could not keep holding 4 seats open for ghosts. I sent a direct message to Diane Mom. "I need to know the flight arrival times for the rehearsal dinner. The venue needs to know if we are feeding 4 extra people." Her response came 4 hours later. It was not a flight number. It was a paragraph that had clearly been drafted, revised, and polished to sound as condescendingly sweet as possible. "Violet, honey, we have been talking. With Logan's stress levels being what they are, and the flight schedules being so chaotic, we just do not think it is feasible to cram everything into one weekend. We do not want to bring negative energy to your day. So, we have decided we will celebrate later. We can do a nice family dinner when we get back. Logan's trip is already booked, and we need to be there for him. You understand? We will celebrate later." It was the same phrase from the text I would receive on my wedding day. It was their mantra. It was their way of saying that my milestones were movable, adjustable, and ultimately optional. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter. The room was silent. Caleb was at work. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a cable finally giving way under too much tension. I picked up the phone and dialed Diane. She answered on the second ring, her voice sounding rushed and annoyed. "Violet, I am at the store buying travel toiletries. Is this urgent?" "Are you coming to my wedding?" I asked. My voice was flat. I did not recognize it. Diane sighed, a long, beleaguered exhale that suggested I was asking her to donate a kidney. "I just texted you. Honey, we will celebrate later. It is just too much right now. The logistics. It is not logistics." I cut in. "It is a choice. You are choosing a vacation over your daughter. I am choosing my son's well-being," she snapped, dropping the sweet facade. Logan is in crisis. Violet, he is burnt out. He needs his family. You have Caleb. You are fine. You have always been fine. Why do you have to be so needy? I am not being needy, I said, my voice rising. I am getting married. It is the one day in my life where I am supposed to be the priority. Oh, stop it, she hissed. You are being dramatic. You are making this about you. It is my wedding, I shouted. It is supposed to be about me. Is Dad there? I asked, my breath coming in short gasps. Put Dad on the phone. There was a rustling sound. I heard muffled whispering. Then, my father's voice came on the line. Hey, kiddo, he said. He sounded tired. He sounded like a man who just wanted to go watch television. Dad, I said, tears finally spilling over. Are you really not coming? Are you really going to let her do this? There was a silence, a long, heavy silence that hurt more than any scream. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the background noise of a Target or a Walmart. I waited for him to be a father. I waited for him to say, no, I will be there. I am getting on a plane. Look, Violet, he finally said, your mother. She has a lot on her plate. And Logan. Well, you know how he gets. We just want peace. He wanted peace. He wanted the absence of conflict with his wife, even if it meant the presence of devastation for his daughter. I understand, I whispered. I hung up. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the phone. I felt stripped clean. I saw the architecture of my family for the first time without the drywall of denial. There was a set of laws in the Whitaker house, unwritten but ironclad. Law 1. Logan's desires are medical necessities. If Logan wants to go to Hawaii, it is for his health. If Logan wants a new car, it is for his safety. Law 2. Violet's needs are dramatic impositions. If Violet wants her parents at her wedding, she is being selfish. If Violet wants a graduation dinner, she is being demanding. I sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I felt foolish. I felt like a child who had set up a tea party for dolls that were never going to come to life. When Caleb came home an hour later, he found me there. He did not ask what happened. He saw the phone on the floor. He saw my face. He sat down next to me and pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his shirt, smelling the concrete dust and laundry detergent, and I sobbed. I sobbed not for the wedding, but for the loss of the hope I had been nurturing for 30 years. They are not coming, I choked out. They are going to Hawaii. Caleb held me tighter. He did not offer platitudes. He did not say, maybe they will change their minds. He respected me enough to tell me the truth. Violet, he said, his voice rumbling against my ear, you do not need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. I pulled back and looked at him. They have made their choice, he said, and it is a terrible, ugly choice, but it frees you. You do not have to chase them anymore. You do not have to audition for the role of their daughter. You did not get the part, and thank God for that, because the directors are insane. I laughed. It was a wet, shaky sound, but it was a laugh. We are your family, he said. Me, my parents, your friends, the people who show up. That is the list. I nodded. He was right. I wiped my face. Okay, I said, okay. But the universe, or perhaps the algorithm, had one final twist of the knife for me before the ceremony. The day of my final dress fitting arrived. It was 3 days before the wedding. I stood in the boutique, surrounded by mirrors. The seamstress was adjusting the hem. The dress was magnificent. It was lace and silk, fitted through the bodice and flaring out gently. I looked like a bride. I looked like a woman who was loved. My phone was in my purse, sitting on a velvet chair in the corner. It buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again. Can you check that I asked the seamstress? It might be the florist. She walked over and picked up the phone. She frowned. It is Instagram, she said. I took the phone. I shouldn't have. I should have thrown it out the window, but I unlocked it. My feed was flooded. Diane had posted an album, Aloha from Paradise. The first photo was of her and Logan. They were standing on a beach. The water behind them was a turquoise that looked fake. The sky was an impossible blue. Diane was wearing a floral dress and holding a Mai Tai. Logan was wearing sunglasses and a lei, pointing at the camera with a smirk. They looked happy. They looked radiant. They did not look like people who were missing their daughter's wedding. They did not look like people burdened by guilt. They looked like people who had successfully escaped a burden. The timestamp said, "Just now. While I was standing in a dress I bought alone. Pinning a veil I chose alone. Preparing for a ceremony they would not see. They were toasting to their freedom." I swiped to the next photo. It was a video. Logan was panning the camera around a luxurious hotel suite. "Check out the view," he narrated. "Mahina Coast Club, top floor. We really outdid ourselves this time." My heart hammered against my ribs. Mahina Coast Club. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I was too overwhelmed by the visual evidence of my abandonment. I looked at the date on the post. May 21st. They were there. It was real. I looked up at the mirror. I saw a woman in a white dress, alone, but for the first time, the image didn't look sad. It looked formidable. The seamstress looked at me with concern. "Is everything okay?" "Honey, bad news." I looked at the photo of my mother laughing on the beach one last time. I memorized the way the sun hit her face. I memorized the complete lack of shadow in her eyes. "No," I said, handing the phone back to her. "No bad news. Just a weather report." I turned back to the mirror. "Pin it tighter." I said to the seamstress, "I want it to fit perfectly." She nodded and went back to work. I stood there, spine straight, watching my reflection. They were in Hawaii. They were drinking cocktails. They were celebrating their victory. But as I watched the seamstress secure the final layer of lace, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They thought they had won because they had left me behind. They didn't realize that by leaving me behind, they had untethered me. I was no longer waiting for them. I was no longer holding a seat. I was free. And as the notifications continued to roll in likes, comments, heart emojis on my mother's vacation photos, I just smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Enjoy the vacation, Mom." I thought, "Enjoy the view. Because when you get back, the locks will be changed." And I'm not talking about the house. The sky on my wedding day was an insult. It was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of hue that photographers pray for and poets write bad verses about. The sun draped over the rolling hills of the vineyard like a heavy, golden blanket. It was warm, vibrant, and alive. It was the exact opposite of the cold, hollow cavity in the center of my chest. I stood in the bridal suite, a converted farmhouse room with exposed beams and vintage mirrors. My bridesmaids were a flurry of lavender silk and excited chatter, fixing lip liner and adjusting straps. They were trying so hard to be loud enough to drown out the silence that was coming from my phone. There was a knock on the door. I froze. A foolish, childish part of me thought, they came. They surprised me. It was all a bad joke. The door opened. It was not my mother. It was a woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a sensible navy dress that looked like she had bought it 10 years ago. Aunt Marla. Marla was my mother's older sister. They had not spoken properly in 5 years, mostly because Marla had committed the cardinal sin of telling Diane that she was spoiling Logan. Marla lived in Oregon. She hated flying. She hated crowds. But there she was, standing in the doorway of a vineyard in North Carolina, clutching a small beaded purse. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Marla crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug that smelled of peppermint and old books. She was stiff, bony, and unsentimental, but her arms were solid. "I did not think you would come," I whispered into her shoulder. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, dark beads that missed nothing. "I am here for you, Violet," she said, her voice raspy. "Not for them, never for them." She smoothed a stray hair from my forehead. "You look beautiful," she added, "and you look strong. Do not let them take this day from you. Do not give them that satisfaction." She did not ask where they were. She knew. The entire extended family knew. The gossip had traveled through the telephone lines like electricity. Diane and Logan were in Hawaii. Violet was alone. Marla was the only one who had boarded a plane to stand in the gap. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Thank you, Aunt Marla. When the time came to walk, the air outside was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. I stood at the entrance of the ceremony space. I could see the guests seated in rows of white chairs. I could see the altar draped in greenery, and I could see the gap. The 4 empty chairs on the left side of the aisle were like a physical blow, even though I had placed the signs there myself. Seeing them now, in the harsh light of day, was devastating. Mother of the bride, father of the bride, brother of the bride, they were not just seats, they were a monument to my insignificance. The music started. A cello hummed the opening notes of Can't Help Falling in Love. I took a breath. I stepped out. The walk was a blur of faces. I saw my college roommate wiping her eyes. I saw my boss from Minneapolis smiling encouragingly, but my eyes kept flickering to the left. I felt a phantom draft, a chill radiating from the empty front row. I had to physically force my legs to keep moving past that void. I had to step through the cold spot where my family should have been. I reached the front. I looked at Caleb. He was my anchor. But then came the moment I had been dreading. The officiant looked out at the crowd. The script hung in the air. Who gives this woman? The silence that followed was less than 2 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. It was the space where a father's voice should have been. It was the space where Ron should have stood up, squeezed my hand, and passed me to the man I loved. Instead, there was movement on the right. Arthur Morgan, Caleb's father, stepped forward. He was a big man, a retired union carpenter with hands like catcher's mitts. He didn't look at the empty chairs. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked right at me. He took my hand. His palm was calloused and warm. "We do," he said. His voice was a rumble of thunder. "We all do." I looked at Caleb's mother, Eleanor, seated in the front row on the right. She was weeping openly, her hands pressed to her mouth. She nodded at me, a fierce, protective nod. In that moment, I felt 2 things simultaneously. I felt a surge of gratitude so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. And I felt a spike of grief so sharp it pierced right through the joy. Because being loved this well by strangers only highlighted how poorly I had been loved by my own blood. I smiled. I forced the corners of my mouth up. I squeezed Arthur's hand. But I knew that if anyone looked closely at the photographs later, they would see that my eyes were rimmed with red. And it wasn't just from happiness. The ceremony ended. We were married. We walked back up the aisle, hand in hand. While people cheered, I didn't look at the left side. I refused to look. The reception was a haze of toasts and cake. I drank 2 glasses of champagne quickly, needing the bubbles to numb the edge of my nerves. During the dinner service, a young waiter approached the head table. He looked nervous. "Mrs. Morgan?" he asked. I startled at the new name. "Yes, a courier dropped this off earlier," he said, handing me a thick, cream-colored envelope. He said it was urgent. I took it. I knew the handwriting immediately. It was the same looping script that had signed my permission slips and birthday cards for 30 years. Diane. My heart did a traitorous little flip. Had they sent a heartfelt letter, a substantial gift to make up for the absence? I opened it under the table, hidden by the tablecloth. Inside was a check. I pulled it out. $500. I stared at the number. $500. It was a perfectly respectable amount for a distant cousin or a family friend. From parents who were currently staying in a villa that likely cost $2,000 a night. It was a joke. It was an insult calculated to the penny. Wrapped around the check was a note on personalized stationery. Violet. It read, "We are thinking of you. I know you are disappointed, but you will understand priorities when you are older. Family health comes first. Enjoy the party. Love. Mom. You will understand priorities." The rage that flared in my stomach was hot and acidic. They were gaslighting me from 4,000 miles away. But there was something else in the envelope. A piece of paper had been folded and tucked behind the note, as if it had been grabbed by mistake or used as backing. I pulled it out. It was a printed confirmation page. Mahina Coast Vacation Club, Platinum Membership Agreement, Primary member Diane Whitaker. Secondary member Logan Whitaker. I frowned. I had seen this name before. Mahina Coast. It was the place Logan had tagged in his video. My eyes scanned the document. It looked like a receipt for a timeshare or a vacation club membership, a very expensive one. The initial buy-in fee listed was $25,000, and then I saw it. In the section for financing authorization, there was a list of names, Diane, Logan, and a third line, guarantor Violet M. Jenkins. I blinked. The font was small. The light in the tent was dim. I brought the paper closer to my face. My name was there, not as a guest, not as a beneficiary, as a guarantor. I didn't understand. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to this. I remembered sending my information for the flights, my full name, my address, my birth date. Was it possible? No. That was insane. That was criminal. I looked at the date on the paper. May 21st, 2 days ago. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. Why was this paper in the envelope? Had she sent it on purpose? Was she showing off? Or was she just so careless, so consumed by her own narrative, that she had shoved the receipt for her priority into the envelope for her daughter? I felt sick. I folded the paper quickly, shoving it back into the envelope along with the check and the note. I couldn't deal with this right now. If I thought about it, if I really let myself think about the possibility that my mother had used my identity to finance a vacation for my brother, I would scream, and I was done screaming. I took out my phone. I needed to reclaim the narrative. I needed to put a barrier between me and them. I selected a photo from the ceremony. It was a candid shot someone had texted me. It showed Arthur holding my hand, with Caleb smiling in the background. It was warm, imperfect, and real. I typed a caption. Sometimes the family that shows up is the one you build. I posted it. No tags, no mentions of the empty chairs. Just the truth. I put the phone down and turned to Caleb. He was laughing at something his best man was saying. He looked happy. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be the wife he deserved, not the victim of the Whitaker family circus. I shoved the envelope deep into my purse. I treated it like radioactive material. I would deal with it later. I would deal with it when the champagne wore off. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. A comment from Logan. Looks fun. He wrote, "Wish schedules aligned. Have a drink for us. Wish schedules aligned," as if it were a celestial event, as if the planets had conspired to keep them away. Rather than a deliberate choice to book a flight to Hawaii, I looked at the words on the screen. Then I looked at my purse, where the paper with Mahina Coast Vacation Club was burning a hole in the lining. Schedules. I thought, priorities. I felt a strange shift inside me. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard curiosity. What had they done? What had they signed? Caleb touched my arm. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "You went somewhere else for a second." I looked at him. I looked at his kind, honest face. I made a decision. I was not going to let them ruin tonight. I was not going to let them ruin my honeymoon. I am fine. I lied. I am just tired. I picked up my phone and turned it off. I powered it down completely. "Let's dance," I said. I stood up and pulled him toward the dance floor. But as I moved, I could feel the weight of the envelope in my bag. It was a bomb. I knew it was a bomb, but I was going to let it tick for a few more days. I would go on my honeymoon. I would drink rum punch in Puerto Rico. I would swim in the ocean with my husband. And when I came back, I would find out exactly what the price of my family's priorities really was. San Juan was a fever dream of cobalt cobblestones and humidity that clung to your skin like a lover. For the first 72 hours of our honeymoon, I managed to pretend that the world ended at the coastline of Puerto Rico. We wandered through the fortress of El Morro, drinking café con leche and letting the Atlantic wind whip the tension out of our shoulders. I left my phone in the hotel safe. It sat there in the dark, a small rectangle of black glass, silent and impotent. I wanted to be a new person here. I wanted to be Mrs. Violet Morgan, a woman who drank rum punch at 11 in the morning and did not have a family history that read like a case study for a psychology textbook, And for 3 days, it worked. I felt lighter. The phantom ache of the empty chairs at the wedding began to fade, replaced by the sound of coqui frogs and the warmth of Caleb's hand in mine. But you cannot live in a vacuum forever. On the fourth morning, while Caleb was in the shower, the itch returned. It is a specific kind of anxiety that belongs to children of chaotic households. It is the feeling that silence is not peace, but rather the gathering of breath before a scream. I needed to know the blast radius. I opened the safe. I took out the phone. I pressed the power button. The device vibrated against my palm for a full minute. Emails, texts, social media notifications. They stacked up on the screen like debris from a landslide. I sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets tangled around my legs, and I opened Facebook first. I needed to see the narrative they were spinning. I knew there would be one. Diane Whittaker did not endure a public absence without creating a public justification. It was the first thing on my feed. A long, rambling post, uploaded 24 hours ago. It had 43 likes and 12 comments from her echo chamber of friends. The hardest part of motherhood, she wrote, is realizing that the more you give, the less you receive. We pour ourselves into our children. We sacrifice our dreams so they can chase theirs. But sometimes, when they fly the nest, they look back at you not with gratitude, but with judgment. I am learning that it is okay to step back. It is okay to say that my mental health matters too. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if that someone is your own flesh and blood. She did not name me. She did not have to. The timing was a neon sign. She was painting herself as the martyr who had been forced to retreat to Hawaii to heal from the trauma of having an ungrateful daughter. I felt a dry, cynical laugh bubble up in my throat. She had skipped my wedding to buy a timeshare, and now she was the one being set on fire. The gymnastics were impressive. Then I switched to Instagram. Logan, my brother, had posted a reel. He was sitting on a balcony, the ocean shimmering behind him, looking tan and relaxed. He was wearing expensive sunglasses. The caption read, "Protect your peace." I tapped the audio. "You know," Logan said to the camera, his voice smooth and practiced, "we live in a society that glorifies toxic obligations. People think that just because you share DNA, you owe people your time, you owe them your presence. But that is old school thinking. If an event drains you, if the expectations are too high, you have to prioritize your own headspace. I am out here in the islands, reconnecting with what matters. Real family understands that. Fake family gets mad about it." I stared at his face. He was lecturing the internet on boundaries while actively trampling mine. He was using therapy language to justify narcissism. It was a masterclass in deflection. The door to the bathroom opened, and Caleb walked out. A towel wrapped around his waist, steam billowing behind him. He saw me on the phone. He saw the hunch of my shoulders. "Don't do it." "Vi," he said softly. "Put it down." "I cannot." I said, not looking up. "You have to hear this. Logan is calling the wedding a toxic obligation." Caleb sighed and walked over to his nightstand. He picked up his own phone. "I know," he said. I looked at him. "You know?" He hesitated, then sat down on the bed next to me. "Your mom texted me yesterday," he said. "I did not want to show you until we were flying home. I didn't want to ruin the trip." "Show me," I said. He handed me his phone. The text from Diane was a wall of blue. "Caleb," it began, "I am writing to you because I know you are a reasonable man. Violet is spiraling. Her behavior has been incredibly hurtful to the family. She is trying to make us look bad because we could not make the wedding. You need to speak to her. You are the man of the house now. Explain to her that families have conflicts and she needs to be more flexible. We expect an apology when we all get back. Help her see reason." The blood rushed to my ears. Man of the house. Expect an apology. She was trying to recruit him. She was trying to bypass me, the hysterical daughter, and appeal to the reasonable man to get me back in line. It was a tactic from the 1950s, and it made my skin crawl. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice trembling. Caleb took the phone back and scrolled down. Diane. He had written, "Violet is not spiraling. She is hurt because her parents chose a vacation over her wedding. We gave you the date 8 months ago. That was your choice. Do not contact me asking me to control my wife. If you want a relationship with us, you will start by apologizing to her. Not the other way around. I looked at Caleb. I looked at the firm, unwavering line of his jaw. I had spent my life watching my father fold like a cheap card table whenever Diane raised her voice. To see a man stand between me and her, to see him hold the line without flinching, was a sensation so foreign I almost didn't recognize it. She replied, "Of course," Caleb said, tossing the phone onto the duvet. She said I was being disrespectful and that she was praying for my softened heart. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I felt heavy. Not the sharp, adrenaline-fueled heaviness of the wedding day, but a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. It never ends. I whispered, "They hit me. I bleed. They tell everyone I cut myself. Then they ask me to apologize for getting blood on the carpet. We are opting out," Caleb said, kissing the top of my head. "We are done playing. Let them scream into the void." I nodded. I wanted to believe it was that simple. I wanted to believe that if I just stopped engaging, the war would end. But the universe has a way of escalating things when you try to walk away. That evening, we ordered room service. I was sitting on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. My phone was on the table. A call came in. It was an 800 number. I let it ring. I assumed it was a telemarketer. I assumed it was spam. It rang again 5 minutes later. Same number. I ignored it again. Then, an email notification popped up. The subject line caught my eye because it was in all caps. Urgent payment past due. Mahina Coast Finance. I frowned. I tapped the notification. It was a generic-looking email. "Dear customer, we have not received your initial installment payment of $450. Your account is now past due. Please log in to avoid late fees and reporting to credit bureaus." I was about to delete it. It had to be a phishing scam. I had never heard of Mahina Coast Finance. Mahina Coast. My hand froze over the delete button. The memory flashed in my mind like a strobe light. The piece of paper in the envelope at the wedding, the confirmation page I had shoved into my purse and tried to forget, Mahina Coast Vacation Club, and Logan's video, Mahina Coast Club. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence. Scammers got names from data breaches all the time. But the dread wouldn't leave. It sat there, cold and heavy. I looked at Caleb. He was inside, watching a baseball game on the hotel television. "I need to check something," I mumbled, mostly to myself. I opened the App Store. I downloaded a credit monitoring app. I had deleted it months ago because my score was perfect and I didn't need the clutter. My fingers shook as I typed in my social security number. I waited for the two-factor authentication code. It felt like it took an hour. The app loaded. The dashboard appeared. I gasped. The sound was involuntary, a sharp intake of air that sounded like I had been punched. My score, usually a pristine 780, had dropped. It hadn't plummeted yet. The late payment was likely too fresh to hit the bureaus fully, but there was a red flag notification at the top of the screen. New account alert. I tapped it. Mahina Coast Lending Services. Opened May 15th. Credit limit $30,000. Balance $25,000. I stared at the numbers. They danced before my eyes. $25,000. I clicked on the account details. Primary account holder, Violet M. Jenkins. Address on file. 2 Oakwood Lane, Cleveland, Ohio. That was my parents' address. The world tilted on its axis. The humidity of the Puerto Rican night suddenly felt suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I remembered the text from Diane weeks ago. "Send me your full info, legal name, birth date, current address. I want to put you down as the destination contact." I had given it to her. I had handed her the weapon, loaded the chamber, and pressed the barrel to my own temple. They hadn't just used my name as a guarantor. They had opened a credit line in my name. They had used my stellar credit history, the one I had built by eating ramen and driving a beat-up sedan for a decade, to finance their luxury vacation. The paperwork in the wedding envelope wasn't a mistake. It was a receipt. It was a taunt. Or maybe Diane was so delusional she thought that by putting the receipt in the card, she had informed me, and therefore I had consented. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the stone balcony floor. Violet Caleb called out. I walked into the room. My face must have been pale because Caleb stood up immediately. What is it? He asked. Who died? Nobody died. I said. My voice was eerily calm. It was the calm of a person who has just realized that the house isn't just on fire. The arsonist is standing in the driveway holding a gas can. I showed him the phone. Look at the address. I said, look at the balance. Caleb took the phone. He read the screen. He squinted. Then his eyes went wide. Is this the Hawaii trip? He asked. Yes, I said. They put it in your name. Yes, without asking me, yes. Caleb looked at me. The anger that had been simmering in him since the wedding exploded. His face turned red. That is fraud. Violet, that is a felony. I walked over to the minibar. I opened a bottle of water and drank it in one long gulp. My hands were shaking, but my mind was sharpening. The fog of hurt feelings was gone. The emotional confusion was gone. Sadness is for people who have lost something they can get back. I had lost my parents a long time ago. I just hadn't admitted it. This wasn't loss. This was theft. I remembered the empty chairs. I remembered the text message. We will celebrate later. They weren't celebrating. They were spending my money. They were drinking cocktails on my credit. They were lecturing the world on mental wealth while stealing my actual wealth. I looked at my husband. Hawaii wasn't a vacation. I said, it was a transaction. They didn't skip the wedding because they didn't care. They skipped the wedding because they had a closing appointment to sign papers, and they needed to be there in person to forge my signature. Caleb slammed the phone down on the bed. We are calling the police, he said. Right now. No. I said. I picked up the phone. I looked at the red numbers on the screen. Not yet. I said, we are in Puerto Rico. We cannot do anything from here except ruin the last 2 days of our trip. I turned the phone off. I walked over to the safe and put it back inside. I punched in the code. The lock clicked shut with a satisfying finality. Violet Caleb asked, confused, What are you doing? I'm going to finish my honeymoon. I said, I am going to swim in the ocean. I am going to eat mofongo. I am going to sleep next to you. I turned to him. My eyes were dry. My heart was cold. And when we get back, I said, I am not going to call the police. I'm going to call a lawyer. And then I am going to burn their entire world to the ground. Caleb looked at me. He saw the shift. He saw that the woman who apologized to coffee tables was dead. Okay, he said. Okay. I walked out onto the balcony and looked at the ocean. It was dark, vast, and indifferent, just like my mother. Enjoy the resort. Mom, I thought, order another round. Put it on the card, because that balance is the price of admission to your own destruction. And I smiled. Not a happy smile, but a necessary one. The return to Raleigh was not a homecoming. It was an entry into a crime scene, our townhouse, usually a sanctuary of soft light and quiet mornings, now felt like an evidence locker. The air was stale. The succulents on the windowsill were drooping, thirsty from a week of neglect. I did not water them. I did not unpack my suitcase. I did not hang up my wedding dress, which was still stuffed into a garment bag, smelling of lavender and betrayal. I sat down at the dining room table, opened my laptop, and placed my phone next to it. I had a notebook, a pen, and a mug of black coffee that was too hot to drink. Caleb sat across from me. He had taken the day off work. He said he was using a personal day, but I knew he was standing guard. He was afraid that if left alone, I might drive to Ohio and set something on fire. He was wrong. I was past arson. I was into demolition, and demolition requires blueprints. I dialed the customer service number for Mahina Coast Lending Services. The hold music was a cheerful, tropical ukulele tune that made my teeth ache. I waited for 12 minutes. When a representative finally answered, her voice was chirpy and professional. Thank you for calling Mahina Coast. My name is Brittany. How can I help you today? I took a breath. My voice was steady, terrifyingly so. I am calling about a new account opened in my name. I said, I believe there has been an error. I can certainly help with that. Brittany chirped. Can I have your full name and social security number? I gave them to her. I heard the click-clack of a keyboard on the other end. Okay, Ms. Jenkins, I see the account here. It looks like everything is active. The first payment was due on the 1st of the month, which is why you received the notification. We can process that over the phone if you like. I do not want to process a payment. I said, I want to verify the details of the account. Can you tell me the billing address on file? Sure, she said. It is 1402 Oakwood Lane, Cleveland, Ohio. The address I grew up in, the house where I learned to walk on eggshells. And who is listed as the authorized contact? I asked. I have a Diane W. listed here. She said, Diane W. Not Diane Whitaker, just Diane W. It was a small, slippery detail, the kind someone uses when they want plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't sign my full name. It doesn't count. And the account origination date? I asked, my pen hovering over the notebook. May 15th. Brittany said. I wrote it down. May 15th. That was 9 days before my wedding. That was 3 days after I had sent Diane the text message with my personal details for the flight bookings. I see. I said, Brittany, can you tell me what this loan was for? Specifically, it is for a platinum ownership interest in the Mahina Coast Vacation Club. She recited, a floating week, biannual usage, with the deeded property located in Maui, a deed. They had bought real estate, or at least, the timeshare version of it. Is there a digital signature on file? I asked. Yes, ma'am. It was signed via DocuSign on May 15th at 4:30 in the afternoon. I looked at the calendar on the wall. On May 15th at 4:30 in the afternoon. I was in a Zoom meeting with my marketing team in Minneapolis. I had 3 witnesses who could prove I was nowhere near a document signing platform. Thank you. Brittany, I said, I need to dispute this account as fraudulent. I did not open it. I did not sign for it. There was a pause. The chirpiness vanished from Brittany's voice, replaced by a guarded, corporate tone. I can mark the account for investigation. Ms. Jenkins, but since the address matches a known previous address on your credit file, and the co-signers share your last name well, maiden name, it might be difficult. Usually, these are civil matters. I am not asking if it is difficult, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I am telling you it is fraud. Please mark the account. I hung up. I looked at Caleb. He was watching me with an expression that was half fear, half admiration. May 15th, I said. He nodded. The day you sent the text. I opened my phone and scrolled back through the messages. It was right there. The bait. Send me your full info, current address, full legal name as it appears on your ID, and your birth date. I want to put you down as the destination contact so the airline sends the updates to you. I took a screenshot. I printed it. Then I printed the email confirmation from the wedding envelope, the one I had almost thrown away. I placed them side by side on the table. The timeline was absolute. May 12th, Diane asks for info. May 15th, account opened using that info. May 21st, they arrive in Hawaii to close the deal. May 24th, my wedding. They didn't skip the wedding because of mental health. They didn't skip it because of scheduling conflicts. They skipped it because the closing appointment for the timeshare was set for that week in Hawaii, and they needed to be there in person to sign their half of the papers while using my credit to float the loan. The phrase Hawaii trip already booked took on a sickening new meaning. It wasn't a vacation booking. It was a closing date. I felt a surge of bile in my throat, but I swallowed it. What do we do? I asked Caleb. Do we go there? Do I call her? Caleb reached across the table and put his hand on my wrist. His grip was firm. No, he said. You do not call her. Why? I demanded. I want to hear her lie. I want to hear her try to explain this, because if you call her, she will gaslight you. Caleb said, she will cry. She will say it was a misunderstanding. She will say they did it for the family inheritance. She will spin you in circles until you are apologizing to her for having a credit score. He was right. I knew he was right. We do this the right way. Caleb continued. We do this with paper. We freeze the credit. We file the police report. We get a lawyer. We build a wall of evidence so high they cannot climb over it. I nodded. Okay, I said, the right way. We spent the next 2 hours locking down my financial life. We placed freezes on Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. We set up fraud alerts. Every click of the mouse felt like I was turning a key in a lock, shutting them out one door at a time. That afternoon, I had an appointment with a consumer protection attorney named Sarah. She was recommended by a friend of Caleb's. Her office was small, smelling of stale coffee and legal pads, but she had eyes like a shark. I laid everything out on her desk, the screenshots, the banknotes, the timeline. She looked it over in silence for 5 minutes. Then she took off her glasses and looked at me. This is not a family dispute, Violet, she said. This is identity theft, pure and simple. But they are my parents, I said, the old guilt flaring up. It does not matter if they are the Pope, Sarah said. They used your personal identifying information to secure a line of credit without your consent. In the eyes of the law, that is theft. The fact that they are related to you just makes it harder to prosecute, not less illegal. She tapped the paper with her pen. You have 2 choices, she said. You can pay the $25,000 plus interest to keep the peace, or you can file an identity theft report with the FTC and a police report. If you do the second one, the bank has to remove the debt from your name, but the bank will then go after the people who signed it. She looked at me meaningfully. They will go after your parents. Are you ready for that? I thought about the empty chairs. I thought about the text message. We will celebrate later. I thought about Logan's video, preaching about toxic obligations while spending my money. I am ready. I said, good. Sarah said, start gathering more. Did anyone else know? Was there any other communication I thought about Aunt Marla? I called her from the car on the way home. Marla picked up on the 3rd ring. Violet. Is everything okay? You sounded short at the wedding. I didn't have time for pleasantries, Aunt Marla. I said, before Mom and Logan went to Hawaii. Did they talk to you about it? Did they mention anything about buying something? There was a silence on the line, then a sigh. I knew it, Marla muttered. I knew something smelled rotten. What did she say? I pressed. She called me about a month ago. Marla said. She was bragging. Violet, you know how she gets? She said Logan had found a legacy asset in the islands. She said they were getting a deal of a lifetime, but they had to move fast. She said the closing window was tight. The closing window? Did she say how they were paying for it, I asked. She was vague. Marla said, she said they were leveraging family resources. I assumed she meant your father's retirement account. I told her she was crazy to spend that kind of money on a timeshare, but she said it was for Logan's future. She said he needed an asset in his name to build his portfolio. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Leveraging family resources. I was the resource. I was the livestock they had taken to market. Thank you. Marla. I said, Violet, she asked, her voice dropping. What did they do? They stole my credit. Marla. They skipped my wedding to go sign the papers using my name because their credit wasn't good enough. Oh, my God, Marla whispered. I hung up. I sat in the driveway of my townhouse for a long time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. It was the same golden hour light that had bathed the vineyard during the ceremony. I realized then that the grief was gone. Grief is a heavy, wet blanket. This was different. This was armor. For 34 years, I had thought my family was just dysfunctional. I thought they were emotionally immature. I thought they loved me, but just didn't know how to show it. I was wrong. They were predators, and I had been the prey. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a guarantor. They saw me as an insurance policy. They kept me around, kept me seeking their approval, just in case they needed to harvest something from me. And when the big prize came along, the Hawaii condo, the Golden Boy's dream, they harvested me without a second thought. I walked inside. Caleb was making dinner. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air. Normal and grounding. I sat down at the table. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft portal. I filled out the affidavit. Name Violet Marie Jenkins. Suspects Diane Whitaker, Logan Whitaker. Relationship to victim mother. Brother. I typed in the details. I uploaded the screenshots. I uploaded the statement from the bank. My finger hovered over the submit button. It was a small button, a harmless gray rectangle. But I knew what it was. It was the pin of a grenade. Once I pulled it, there was no putting it back. The explosion would be total. It would destroy the facade of the happy Whitaker family forever. It would likely send police to my parents' door. It would ruin Logan's reputation. I thought about calling them one last time. I thought about asking for an explanation. Then I remembered the check for $500. You will understand priorities when you are older. I understood them now. I clicked submit. The screen refreshed. Your report has been filed. I closed the laptop. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being cut loose. I walked into the kitchen and wrapped my arms around Caleb from behind. He stopped chopping vegetables and leaned back into me. Done, he asked. Done, I said. The bomb was armed. The timer was ticking. And in Hawaii, or Cleveland, or wherever they were still celebrating, completely unaware that the ground beneath their feet had just turned into a minefield. The silence from my family after the wedding was not peaceful. It was tactical. It was the heavy, suffocating stillness of a hunter waiting in a blind, watching to see which way the wind would blow. For 3 months, the radio silence was absolute. I went to work. I watered my plants. I watched my credit report like a hawk, noting that the Mahina Coast account had been flagged as disputed by consumer thanks to my FTC filing. The debt was still there, hovering like a storm cloud, but the collection calls had stopped. The gears of the bureaucracy were grinding slowly, but they were grinding. Then, just as the leaves in Raleigh began to turn a burnt orange, the strategy shifted. It started with a notification on my phone. Diane Whitaker liked a photo you posted. I frowned. It was a photo from 4 years ago. A picture of me and Dad at a barbecue, back before the resentment had calcified into a wall. Then came a comment on a picture of my dog. Sweet boy. Grandma misses him. Grandma. The word sat on the screen. Absurd and desperate. She was love-bombing. It is a classic narcissist maneuver. When the silent treatment fails to bring the victim crawling back, they switch to overwhelming affection. They try to rewrite history with heart emojis and nostalgia, betting that your desire for a mother is stronger than your memory of her abuse. 2 days later, the package arrived. It was a box, wrapped in silver paper, delivered by FedEx. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, was an invitation. It was not just cardstock. It was a slab of acrylic, heavy and engraved with gold lettering. Logan Whitaker, Brianna Miller. Request the honor of your presence. The Lodge at Edgewood, Lake Tahoe, October 15th. I stared at it. My brother, who had claimed he was too financially stressed to attend my wedding, was throwing a black tie affair at one of the most expensive resorts in California. Brianna. I vaguely remembered her. She was a quiet, pretty girl he had been dating on and off for a year. I wondered if she knew that her future husband financed his vacations by identity theft. My phone rang almost immediately after the package was marked delivered. It was Diane. I looked at Caleb. He was sitting on the couch, reading a book. He saw the caller ID and raised an eyebrow. Answer it, he said softly. Let's see what the pitch is. I put it on speaker. Violet Diane's voice chirped, bright and breathless. Did you get the mail? I got it. Mom, I said. Oh, good. Isn't it stunning Brianna has such taste? Look, honey, I know things have been strained, but this is a fresh start, a new chapter. She paused, waiting for me to agree. When I didn't, she plowed on. We want you there, Violet. We need the whole family together. It is time for healing. We have all been under so much pressure, and I think a weekend in the mountains is exactly what we need to reconnect. Family has to show up for each other, right? The hypocrisy was so dense it was almost physical. Family has to show up. This, from the woman who had spent my wedding day sipping Mai Tais 4,000 miles away. There was no apology. There was no, "I am sorry we missed your day." There was just the bulldozer of her will, paving over the past. It is a long way to travel. "Mom," I said neutrally, "and very short notice." "Oh, nonsense," she said. "It is 6 weeks away. And listen, we are covering the villa. You and Caleb just need to get yourselves there. We have a big family suite booked. It will be just like old times. Just like old times." That was exactly what I was afraid of. "I will talk to Caleb," I said. I hung up. 5 minutes later, a text from Logan arrived. "Hope you can make it. Let's move on from the weirdness. It has been long enough. Brianna really wants you there." Weirdness. That was what he called grand larceny. Weirdness. I picked up the invitation again. I flipped it over. Tucked into the back was a smaller card detailed in gold foil. Weekend itinerary. Friday, welcome cocktails by the lake. Saturday ceremony reception. Sunday farewell. Brunch family paperwork session. I froze. I read the last line again. Sunday, 10:00 a.m. Family paperwork session. Notary on site. My heart hammered against my ribs. A paperwork session. At a wedding, why would you need a notary at a farewell brunch? Then it clicked. The clarity was sharp and cold. The bank. I had disputed the debt. I had frozen my credit. The bank was likely pressuring them. They couldn't refinance, or perhaps they couldn't make a modification to the loan, because the primary guarantor me was flagging the account. They needed a signature. A real wet ink, notarized signature to validate the fraudulent digital one they had faked in May. They didn't want me there for healing. They wanted me there because they needed my hand to hold a pen. They needed to entrap me in a room with a notary public and guilt-trip me into signing a document that would make the debt legally mine, retroactive to the purchase date. They were luring me into a legal ambush. I looked at Caleb. "Look at Sunday," I said, handing him the card. He read it. He let out a low whistle. "A notary," he said. "They are not even trying to hide it. They think I'm stupid." I said, "They think I am just the understanding daughter who doesn't read the fine print." I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was different from the hot anger of the honeymoon. This was strategic. "I'm going to call her back," I said. I dialed Diane. She picked up on the first ring. Eager. "Did you check the flight?" she asked. "I have a question about the itinerary." "Mom," I said. "Oh. What is the family paperwork session on Sunday?" There was a pause, a hesitation that lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Oh, that," she said, her voice going up an octave. "It is just some boring administrative stuff. You know, estate planning. Dad and I are updating our wills, and since we are all together, we thought we would just get everything signed. To protect you kids." It was a lie. "You do not update wills at a destination wedding in Tahoe." "Does it have anything to do with the Mahina Coast account?" I asked. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a person who has just stepped on a landmine and heard the click. I do not know what you are talking about," she stammered. "The account ending in 4029, I said, reading the number from my credit report. "The one opened on May 15th, the one with a $25,000 balance." "Violet," she said, her voice hardening, "you are being paranoid. Does the paperwork on Sunday require me to sign as a guarantor?" I asked, "Because I see my name is already on the loan." "Mom, I saw the credit report." She let out a sharp breath. The sweet mom act evaporated instantly. "Listen to me," she snapped. "We made a financial decision for the family. You have excellent credit. You are not using it. Logan needed a boost to get the asset. It is a legacy asset. Violet, it will be yours one day too. We just need you to sign the ratification so the bank stops sending these ridiculous letters. It is a formality. A formality," I repeated. "You committed fraud." "I did what I had to do," she yelled. Her voice cracked. "You were so obsessed with your wedding. You wouldn't listen to reason. We needed to close the deal. And now you are going to come to Tahoe. And you are going to sign the paper. And you are going to stop being such a selfish, ungrateful child. I looked at the phone. I looked at the window, where the autumn leaves were falling. I am not coming. I said, "Excuse me, I am not coming to Tahoe, and I am not signing anything." "Violet, do not do this," she warned. Her voice dropped low, menacing. "If you do not come, you are ruining your brother's wedding. You are breaking this family apart. I didn't break it. I said, you sold it." Logan's voice suddenly came onto the line. He must have been listening in the room. "Violet, stop the drama," he barked. "Just get on the plane. It is one signature. If you do not sign it, the rate jumps up and we lose the preferred status. Do not be a bitch about this." I closed my eyes. I thought about the little girl who used to wait by the window for them to come home. I thought about the woman who stood alone at the altar. "I am not coming." I said again, "You are spiteful." Diane hissed. "You are jealous because Logan is happy. You are immature and petty. You are making a mistake," Logan added. "If you do not fix this, if you do not sign that paper, we are done. You are out. No Christmas, no birthdays. You will be a ghost to us." He thought that was a threat. He thought the withdrawal of his presence was a punishment. He didn't realize that to me. It sounded like salvation. "Is that a promise?" I asked. There was a stunned silence. "I am going to tell everyone," Diane screamed. "I am going to tell the aunts. I am going to tell the cousins. I will tell them you abandoned your brother on his wedding day. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. I will destroy your reputation. Violet, do not test me." I gripped the phone. My hand was steady. My voice was steady. "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them." "You think I won't?" she challenged. "I know you will." I said, "You can tell them whatever story you want. Mom, you can tell them I'm crazy. You can tell them I am cruel." I took a deep breath. But this time, I said, my voice cutting through the static, "I have the paperwork." What she whispered, "I have the timeline." I said, "I have the bank records. I have the IP logs. And I have the FTC filing number." FTC. Logan's voice wavered. "So tell your story," I said, "but make sure it matches the evidence, because if you lie about me one more time, I will release every single page I have." Violet Diane started, her voice suddenly frantic. "Not this time," I said. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't wait for the backpedaling or the tears. I hit the red button. The call ended. The room was silent. I looked at Caleb. He was smiling. It was a fierce, proud smile. "You did it," he said. I looked at the invitation on the table. The gold foil shimmered in the light. "Request the honor of your presence." I picked it up. I walked over to the trash can in the kitchen. I dropped it in. It landed with a dull thud on top of the coffee grounds and eggshells. I felt a strange sensation in my lungs. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 34 years, I was breathing air that didn't belong to them. "I am not going," I said to the empty room. And for the first time, the word no didn't feel like a failure. It felt like a victory. The fallout began less than an hour after I hung up the phone. Diane did not wait for the dust to settle. She went straight to the court of public opinion, which in the Whitaker family was a WhatsApp group chat titled Whitaker Roots Branches. It included 30 people, aunts, uncles, cousins, and second cousins scattered across the Midwest and the East Coast. I had muted the chat years ago, but I hadn't left it. I kept it for the same reason people keep fire extinguishers, not because you want to use them, but because you need to know when the heat is rising. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Then it buzzed again. Then it vibrated continuously for 10 seconds, dancing across the granite surface. I picked it up. Diane had posted a photo. It was a picture of Logan and Brianna, looking glamorous in their engagement shoot. Underneath, she had typed a paragraph that dripped with performative martyrdom. "It breaks a mother's heart to announce that Violet will not be joining us in Tahoe to celebrate her brother's union. We raised our children to support one another, but sometimes jealousy and selfishness cloud judgment. We are praying that Violet finds it in her heart to put family first one day. Until then, we will carry the torch of love without her." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She had painted me as the bitter spinster sister, envious of the golden boy's happiness. The replies started rolling in. "Oh no. Diane. So sorry to hear that. Praying for you all. Family is everything. Hopefully she comes around." I felt Caleb standing behind me. He was reading over my shoulder. "Are you going to let that slide?" he asked. His voice was low, dangerous. I watched the screen. Then, a message popped up from Cousin Sarah. Sarah was smart. Sarah had been at my wedding. Wait, Sarah wrote, "Didn't you guys miss Violet's wedding in May? I thought you were in Hawaii." The chat went silent. The stream of prayer hand emojis stopped abruptly. Then Aunt Marla chimed in. "Yes," Marla wrote. I sat next to the empty chairs. They were celebrating later. Remember, Diane didn't reply. The silence was loud. I looked at Caleb. I looked at the folder on my laptop where I had saved the evidence for the FTC report. "I am not going to argue with her." I said, "I am not going to get into a mudslinging match in a WhatsApp group. That is what she wants. She wants me to sound hysterical." "Then what are you going to do?" Caleb asked. "I am going to send a newsletter." I said, I opened my email client. I composed a new message. I added the email addresses of every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the family. I kept the subject line simple, regarding Tahoe and the Mahina Coast account. I didn't write a long, emotional letter. I didn't use adjectives. I simply wrote, "Dear family, regarding Mom's post about my absence, I am not attending the wedding because I have been advised by my legal counsel to cease contact pending an investigation into identity theft. Attached. Please find 1. The timeline of text messages where Mom asked for my personal data for flight bookings on May 12th. 2. The bank notification showing a credit line opened in my name using that data on May 15th. 3. The vacation club contract signed in Hawaii on May 21st. The same week they missed my wedding. I am not jealous. I am a victim of financial fraud committed by my parents. I wish Logan and Brianna the best, but I will not be signing the guarantor paperwork they have scheduled for Sunday. Best, Violet. I hit send. The sensation was not one of heat, but of cold. It was the clinical, precise feeling of lancing a boil. I put the phone down. 10 minutes passed. The group chat remained dead silent. No one posted. No one defended Diane, but my direct messages started to ping. Cousin Sarah. Holy shit, Violet. Is this real? Uncle Bob call me. Aunt Marla proud of you. They were connecting the dots. They were remembering the celebrate later excuse. They were remembering Diane's sudden bragging about the legacy asset. They were realizing that the woman who posted about sacrificial love was actually a predator who ate her young. I didn't answer any of them. I let the evidence sit there. Truth does not need a PR campaign. But then, a phone call came through that I did not expect. The caller ID said, Brianna Miller. I hesitated. Brianna was 26. She was a kindergarten teacher. She was sweet, eager to please, and completely out of her depth in the shark tank of the Whitaker family. I answered, Hello, Violet. Her voice was small. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet. Violet, I saw the email. I am sorry you had to see that. Brianna, I said gently. I didn't want to ruin your week. No, she said quickly. No, I need to ask you something. I waited. Logan told me the Hawaii condo was a gift from his parents. She whispered. He said they bought it with his dad's retirement money, but lately, things have been weird. Weird how I asked. We went to apply for a mortgage last week. She said, for a starter home, and Logan got denied. The bank said his debt-to-income ratio was too high. But he told me he has zero debt. When I asked him to show me the report, he got really mad. He said his mom handles the financial paperwork because she is better at it. Mom handles the paperwork. The cycle was repeating. Diane was the puppet master, and Logan was the willing marionette, and Brianna was about to be the next guarantor. Brianna, I said, my voice firm. Listen to me very carefully. I am listening. She breathed. Do not sign anything this weekend. I said, nothing. Not a prenup, not a marriage license, and definitely not the family paperwork on Sunday. But Diane said the notary is coming for the estate plan. Brianna said, she said if I do not sign, I am not protected. It is not an estate plan. I said, they need a co-signer to refinance the fraud they committed in my name. If you sign that paper, you are taking on my debt. You are taking on $25,000 of debt for a timeshare that is barely worth 10. I could hear her breathing hitch. Run a credit check on yourself, Brianna, I said, and run one on Logan if you can. But whatever you do not let them bully you into a signature. She started to cry. Soft, terrified sobs. Thank you. Violet, she whispered. She hung up. I looked at Caleb. She knows. I said, good, he said. Now, pack your bags. We are going to Vermont. We left the next morning, while the Whitaker family was converging on Lake Tahoe for a weekend of high-stakes drama. Caleb and I drove north. We rented a small cabin in the Green Mountains. There was no cell service unless you stood on the roof. Friday passed in a blur of red and gold leaves. We hiked. We ate apple cider donuts. We sat by a fire and read books. It was the honeymoon we should have had, stripped of the anxiety of checking notifications. But while we were watching the mist rise off a pond in Vermont, the bomb I had planted in the FTC database finally detonated in California. I didn't know the details until later, pieced together from a frantic voicemail log and a chaotic text from Cousin Sarah. But the timeline was reconstructible. On Saturday morning, the day of the wedding, the fraud investigation unit from the bank made their move. Because I had filed a formal identity theft report, the bank was legally required to aggressively pursue the perpetrators to recover their loss. They didn't care that the perpetrators were my parents. To the bank, they were just criminals. They couldn't arrest them over the phone, of course, but they could and did call the primary contact number listed on the account to inform them that a criminal fraud investigation had been opened and that the account was frozen pending legal action. They called Diane's cell phone at 9 in the morning, Pacific time. Apparently, she was in the bridal suite, getting her makeup done. Sarah told me later that the scream could be heard from the hallway. The perfect Instagram wedding unraveled instantly. The itinerary I had seen was thrown out the window. There were no welcome cocktails. Instead, there was a screaming match in the hotel suite that involved Diane, Logan, and Ron. The narrative Diane had spun that I was just a bitter, jealous sister collapsed under the weight of a federal fraud investigation. You can lie to your cousins, but you cannot lie to a fraud investigator who is recording the call. Ron, my conflict-averse father, finally cracked. He had spent his life enabling them, thinking he was keeping the peace. Now, facing the prospect of legal fees and a potential criminal record, the peace was gone. The wedding ceremony supposedly happened, but it was grim. Sarah said Brianna walked down the aisle with red, swollen eyes. She didn't look like a blushing bride. She looked like a woman who had just seen a ghost. And when the reception came, the paperwork session scheduled for Sunday was quietly removed from the schedule. The notary was sent home on Sunday evening. Caleb and I drove back into an area with cell service. My phone flooded with notifications. Missed calls from Diane, missed calls from Logan, texts from random numbers that were probably flying monkeys sent by my mother. But there was one voicemail that stood out. It was from Ron. I sat in the passenger seat of our car, the heater humming, and I pressed play. Violet. It was my father. His voice was shaking. I had never heard him sound like that. He sounded old. He sounded broken. Violet, you have to stop this, he pleaded. We got a call from the bank. They are talking about police. Violet, they are talking about fraud charges. You cannot do this to your mother. She is sick with worry. She can't breathe. He paused, and I heard him take a ragged breath. We can fix the money, he said. I will take it out of the 401k. I will pay it off. Just, please withdraw the report. You are ruining the family name. Everyone is talking. Brianna's parents are asking questions. You have to stop. Please, call me. The message ended. I sat there, staring at the dashboard. You are ruining the family name. Not, I am sorry we stole from you. Not, I am sorry we lied about you. Not, I love you. He was afraid. But he wasn't afraid of losing me. He wasn't afraid that he had damaged his daughter's soul. He was afraid of the neighbors finding out. He was afraid of the mask slipping. He was afraid of the consequences of his own cowardice. I looked at Caleb. "What did he say?" Caleb asked, keeping his eyes on the road. "He wants me to withdraw the report." I said, "He says I am ruining the family name." Caleb snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "The family name was ruined when they forged your signature," he said. I looked out the window at the passing trees. They were stripping their leaves, preparing for winter. It was a necessary shedding. You cannot grow if you hold on to dead things. I realized then that I didn't feel guilty. The old Violet, the one who apologized to coffee tables, would have been hyperventilating. She would have been dialing the bank, begging to take it back, promising to pay the debt herself just to stop her father from sounding so scared. But that Violet was gone. She had died in the empty row of chairs at the vineyard. The woman sitting in the car was someone else. I was someone who knew the difference between love and leverage. "I am not calling him back," I said. "Good," Caleb said. I opened my phone. I went to the voicemail. I didn't save it. I didn't forward it. I hit delete. It is too late to stop. "Dad," I whispered to the glass. The train had left the station. I wasn't driving it anymore. The law was driving it. And for the first time in the history of the Whittaker family, no one was going to be able to grab the wheel and steer it away from the cliff they had built. I put the phone away and took Caleb's hand. "Let's go home," I said. We drove south, leaving the mountains behind, driving toward a life that was smaller, quieter, and infinitely more real than the one I had left in the wreckage of Lake Tahoe. The meeting took place on a rainy Tuesday in a generic office park 3 miles from the city center. We chose this location because it was neutral ground. It was the office of a mediator named Mr. Henderson, a man with a gray suit and a face that revealed absolutely nothing. It was the kind of room where marriages went to die and businesses were divided up like spoils of war. I arrived 15 minutes early. I wore a black blazer and the kind of sensible heels that make a sharp, authoritative click on laminate flooring. I did not wear my wedding ring. I wore only my watch, checking the time every 30 seconds. Not out of nervousness, but out of a need for precision. I had a folder with me. It was 2 inches thick, color-coded, and organized with the ruthlessness of a forensic accountant. Inside that folder was the anatomy of a betrayal. It held text messages, bank statements, IP logs, and the sworn affidavit I had filed with the Federal Trade Commission. When the door opened, I didn't stand up. My parents walked in. Diane looked smaller than I remembered. The vibrant, domineering woman who had worn a silk caftan in her Hawaii photos was gone. In her place was a woman in a beige cardigan, clutching her purse to her chest as if she expected someone to snatch it. Ron followed her. My father looked gray. He looked like a man who had not slept since the phone call from the fraud investigator ruined his son's wedding weekend. Logan trailed behind them. He wouldn't make eye contact. He slumped into the chair furthest from me, looking at the wall, radiating the petulant energy of a teenager who had been caught stealing liquor from the cabinet. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss the outstanding matter regarding the Mahina Coast liability and the associated fraud report," he said. His voice was dry as dust. Diane spoke first. She didn't look at the mediator. She looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. "Violet." She trembled. "I just want to say, I am so sorry it has come to this. We are a family. We shouldn't be in a room like this. We should be at a dinner table." I didn't blink. I didn't offer a tissue. I opened my folder. "We are not at a dinner table because you stole my identity. Mom," I said. My voice was level. It lacked the jagged edges of my earlier anger. This was just business now. I placed the first document on the polished wood table. It was the screenshot of the text message from May 12th. "Send me your full info." It read, "I want to put you down as the destination contact. You asked for my information under false pretenses." I said, "You told me it was for flight updates." I placed the second document down, the bank notification. 3 days later, "You used that information to open a line of credit for $30,000. Diane sniffed. We were going to tell you. Violet. Everything was moving so fast. The deal was expiring. We thought you would be happy to help your brother build a future. I placed the third document down. It was the confirmation page from the Mahina Coast Vacation Club. And then, I said, sliding the paper toward her, you skipped my wedding. You told me you were going to Hawaii for Logan's mental health. You told everyone I was selfish for wanting you at my ceremony. I leaned forward, but you didn't go for his health, did you? You went because the closing appointment was that week. You had to be there in person to sign your portion of the deed, while you forged my digital signature on the loan. Diane stopped crying. She looked at the paper. The mask slipped. Just for a second. Your credit score is 780, she said. Her voice was flat. Logan's is 500. We couldn't get the financing without a third guarantor. The interest rate would have been triple. There it was. The truth. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about stress. It was about interest rates. So you traded my wedding for a lower APR, I said. Logan shifted in his chair. He slammed his hand on the table. This was Mom's idea, he shouted. Finally looking at me, I told her to ask you first. She said no. She said, Violet is too rigid. She will say no. Just do it and we will explain later. Diane whipped her head around. You ungrateful brat, she hissed at him. I did this for you. You were the one crying about how you needed an asset. You were the one who wanted the status of being an owner. I sat back and watched them. It was like watching rats turn on each other in a sinking ship. They were devouring one another to save their own skins. Stop it, Ron yelled. The room went silent. My father was shaking. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Violet, please, he said. We can fix this. I will cash out the rest of the IRA. I will pay off the loan. Just withdraw the report. Drop the investigation. You are going to send your mother to jail. Is that what you want? To put your mother in handcuffs? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had spent 34 years asking me to be the bigger person so he wouldn't have to be a stronger husband. I didn't put her in handcuffs. Dad, I said, she put herself there when she committed a felony. I pushed the folder toward the mediator. Here are the terms. I said, Mr. Henderson picked up a document I had prepared with my lawyer. Option A. I recited, you sign this admission of liability. It states that you, Diane and Logan Whitaker, opened the account without my knowledge or consent. You accept full legal responsibility for the debt. You agree to a restitution plan with the bank. If you sign this, and the bank accepts the transfer of debt back to you, I will withdraw my cooperation with the criminal investigation. I paused. Option B. You walk out of this room. I keep the fraud alert active. The FTC investigation proceeds. The bank will likely prosecute you for grand larceny to recover their funds, and I will never speak to any of you again. Diane stared at the paper. Her hands were shaking. This will ruin us, she whispered. If we admit to fraud, the bank will close our other accounts. Logan will lose his job if he has a record of financial misconduct. That sounds like a consequence, I said. Not my problem. Diane looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. The sorrow was gone, replaced by the cold, hard narcissism that I knew so well. You are enjoying this, aren't you? She spat. You are enjoying seeing us beg. You think you are so high and mighty. You wait, Violet. You will understand when you are a mother. You will understand that you do whatever it takes to help your child. I felt a chill go down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I hope to be a mother one day, I said softly. And that is exactly why I cannot normalize this. If I have a child, I will teach them that love is not a transaction. I will teach them that stealing from family is not helping. I looked at her. If being a mother means what you think it means, then I never want to be like you. Diane gasped. She looked at Ron. Do something, she shrieked. She is destroying the family. Ron looked at me. He looked at the paper. He looked at his wife. This was his moment. This was the moment where he could finally stand up and say, No, Diane, she is right. We did this. He looked down at his shoes. I am sorry. Violet, he mumbled. We just wanted peace. I stood up. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor was loud and final. "You call this peace?" "Dad," I said, "I call it being used." I turned to the mediator. "They have 10 minutes to sign." I said, "If they don't, file the folder with the district attorney." I turned my back on them. I walked to the window and watched the rain streak against the glass. Behind me, I heard hushed, angry whispers. I heard the scratch of a pen. I heard Logan cursing under his breath. 2 minutes later, Mr. Henderson spoke. "It is signed, Ms. Jenkins." I turned around. The document was on the table. Diane was weeping into her hands. But it wasn't a performance anymore. It was the terrified weeping of a woman who had finally hit a wall she couldn't manipulate her way over. I picked up my copy of the agreement. I placed it in my bag. I looked at them one last time. They looked like strangers. They looked like people I had met in a previous life. "I am not breaking the family," I said, answering the accusation she had thrown at me for months. "The family was broken the day you decided my credit score was worth more than my presence." I walked to the door. "I just refused to be the doormat you used to cover up the cracks," I said. I opened the door and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. There was no need. We had said goodbye in May. They just hadn't realized it. The lobby was empty. I walked through the glass doors and out into the parking lot. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet asphalt and ozone. It was cool and clean. Caleb was leaning against the hood of our car, 20 feet away. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was watching the door, waiting for me. When he saw me, he stood up straighter. He didn't ask, "Did you win?" or "Are you okay?" He just opened his arms. I walked toward him. My legs felt shaky, but my head was clear. I felt lighter. It was a physical sensation, as if a heavy, waterlogged coat had been lifted from my shoulders. I reached him and he pulled me into a hug. He smelled of rain and safety. "Is it done?" he whispered into my hair. "It is done," I said. "They signed." He held me tighter. "I am proud of you," he said. I rested my head on his chest. I listened to the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart. It was a real heart, not a performance. I looked back at the office building. I saw a silhouette in the window. It might have been my father. It might have been a reflection. It didn't matter. I realized then that revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It isn't about screaming or fighting or making them hurt as much as you hurt. Revenge is simply refusing to play the game. Revenge is removing your pawns from their board and walking away to play your own game, by your own rules. I took Caleb's hand. "Let's go home," I said. We got into the car. As we pulled out of the lot, I watched the rearview mirror. The building shrank. The gray office park faded into the distance. I turned forward. The road ahead was open. The windshield was clear. Diane had been right about one thing. She said I would understand priorities when I was older. I looked at my husband's hand resting on the gear shift. I looked at the road leading back to our quiet house, our plants, and the life we were building brick by honest brick. I understood priorities perfectly now. Some people call manipulation family. They call abuse love. They call theft survival. But when you finally look them in the eye and say, "Not this time," you do not lose a family. You get your life back, and that is a price I would pay 1,000 times over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop your location in the comments below, so we can see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Your support means the world to us.